Are we online now? Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here on this wonderful day following all that heat, but it's not dissipated from here yet, has it? Welcome, Chairman, from the Chairman, myself, Eric Kerry, Councillor Eric Kerry. Remind members that the meeting is being broadcast live. Please remind members also to use your microphones. Has somebody got a microphone or a laptop on? Yeah, okay. Remind members to use their microphones when speaking, please, so the public can hear us, and by any other remote people watching. And can I just remind you to switch your phones off, please, mobile phones, so we don't get interrupted. There are no members of the public here, so I won't go through about the members of the public in the public gallery. I may reintroduce that should anybody arrive. So moving on to the first item on the agenda, it's the minutes of the last meeting which we held on the 9th of June. May I ask the committee if the minutes from the last meeting can be agreed, please? Any comments? All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Item number 2 is apologies for absence. So, Joe Toomey, can you confirm any apologies and substitutions, please?
Thank you. We have several apologies today. We have Councillor Graham Chapman from Nottingham City Council, Councillor Zafran Khan from Nottingham City Council, and Councillor Peach's replacement, Councillor Sally Longford from Nottingham City Council. We also have an apology from Sue Reader, who is the scheduled bodies representative on the committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Do any members have any other apologies, please? No. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 3, which is declarations of interest by members and officers. So, A, do any members or officers present have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? I don't see any. B, do any members or officers present have any private interests, either pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare, please? Again, I don't see any. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4, which is the first substantive item on the agenda, and it's a verbal report. It's an update on the appointment of pensioner representatives, and I'd like to hand over to Sarah Stevenson to present the report. But before that, just ask, I will declare that I have been involved in this process. It's been a very, very professional process in my view. So anyway, I'd like to also propose that we note the report. Can I have a seconder, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'll second that report.
Thank you very much. Right. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerry. So this verbal report is to provide committee with an update on the recruitment to the vacant pensioner representative posts within the membership of the Pensions Committee. Members will no doubt remember that one of these posts was occupied for a considerable amount of time by Terry Needham, who obviously provided significant input to the committee, and I think it's fair to say that we do miss that input. So we have, under the constitution of the council, 2 positions for pensioner representatives on this committee. We've run a recruitment campaign. We put an advert onto the council's website, and in the March payslip, which is the first payslip of the year to go out to our pensioners, we included details of what that particular role was, what its commitment was, and how interested individuals could express an interest. From those people that expressed an interest, one candidate actually withdrew prior to the interview and fed back that actually they'd had a change in their personal circumstances that meant that they wouldn't have sufficient time available to commit to the role. The other candidate was interviewed by the panel, and I think we had quite a very good actual discussion, didn't we, Councillor Kerry, with the individual around the role. But again, he's reflected on the commitment that he would need to give to this committee, and actually has stated that having been retired for a number of years, actually what he wished to do was to continue to have that flexibility with his free time. So we still continue to have 2 vacancies for pensioner reps. I've done a little piece of work to have a look at what is the membership across a number of the other LGPS funds. Having looked at 8 LGPS administering authorities, very few, I think it's actually 3, have a pensioner representative. The vast majority appear to have scheme member representatives in that broader sense of a scheme member. And obviously, from our perspective, a scheme member is somebody who's an active member of the scheme, paying contributions, an individual who holds a deferred benefit within the scheme, and a pensioner who's obviously actively receiving benefits. The regulations themselves do not state that the committee or subcommittee needs to have a pensioner representative sat as part of its membership, but it talks about having employer or scheme member representatives. This committee will know from the work programme that has been presented recently that there is a governance, an overarching governance review to be undertaken. And following a discussion with Heather Dickinson, who's the Deputy Monitoring Officer, and myself, I provided her with a feedback on where we got to with this recruitment. What we've suggested is it would be appropriate for these vacant roles and this type of membership to be considered as part of that overarching governance review, and to look at that flexibility that I think the regulations give us, that it's that much broader sense of a scheme member representative. So really the recommendation is that as part of that overarching governance review, we will actually have a look at those particular types of membership of this committee, and that when that overarching governance review report is presented, it will cover off what this membership will look like going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Suffice to say that we did spend a lot of time in the process. We have spent a lot of time on the process so far, and we have identified the weaknesses that Sarah has mentioned. Obviously, that's part of governance, which has to go through revision of our constitution as a committee, and part of that review. So we are doing that. We are continuing the process. We really do want to have the inclusivity, if you like, in the committee. But obviously are disappointed that the work we've done recently hasn't come to fruition with additional members. It's very interesting to see the thoughts and the commitment of people from outside. I think we'll remember Terry, who put an incredible amount of work supporting us in our work. But we are where we are, and I think that we are committed to sorting this out as soon as we can, but really need to do that extra bit of work to look a bit wider and see whether we can find other ways of doing it. So I'll open that up now to any questions or comments from members, please. Councillor Waters.
Yeah, I'd just be interested to know how many members were written out to, and is there a plan to follow up?
Roughly, because we issue obviously pension pay slips, around 40,000 would have had a pension pay slip in March. It fluctuates, but
And it does, and actually on page 11 of the administration annual report, on page 11 of the papers, you'll see that it's 42,715 for 21-22. That's the more accurate figure. Okay, does that answer your question, Councillor Waters? Thank you. Any other questions or comments, please? Okay, we moved and second recommendation. All those in favour, please? Thank you, that's unanimous. Item number 6 is local government. Item number 5, local government pension administration performance report. John, I nearly took your thunder away for a moment there, and I'm sure you were really waiting to get on with this. So Before I hand over to John to introduce the report, I will move the recommendation which is set out on page 19 of the agenda pack. And I'd like for a seconder, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll second that and reserve my right to speak on the subject.
Thank you, Councillor Introna. Mr. Clues, John, would you like to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the performance of the pension administration for the financial year ending 31st of March 2022. I'd just like to say the pension administration has faced another challenging year with a number of points to make. As we've reported previously, we're progressing on the McLeod judgment and setting up the project for the recalculation of benefits. We've also had some changes in legislation. The TPR have introduced new transfer processes for pension funds, and following along with that, we've still had the fallout of COVID, where members are still considering their pension futures, and we've seen an increase really in members looking at taking their benefits from active and deferred. This is also valuation year, which requires the pension administration team to review its data and prepare for the data to be provided to the scheme actuary for the valuation of the fund, and that's going to be provided in August of this, 22nd of August it's going to be provided. So that's just a few things that have been happening over the year. The report does highlight the main activities that the administration team undertakes and how the administration team is organised along with its resources. The report provides a cost of the administration for 2021 and how we are benchmarked against other funds. And you'll see in the report that in 2021 we had a cost of around £14 per member, with an average cost within the benchmarking club of around £21 a member. Quality of data and improvement continues to be high on the pension regulator's agenda, and work is ongoing to improve our data, as we have seen significant improvement over the years, but our common data has improved. There's been a drop in our conditional data, and this is due to work that is ongoing. We are required to report this to the pensions regulator, and we will be refreshing our data for September, and we'll be reporting to the regulator around that time.
May I come in, John, on that point now, please?
Yep.
So what are your indications of that? Are you happy that the work going on is producing the results? Is there anything else you need to do?
Yes, we are producing the results. Work is still ongoing. We're forever updating our data and working with scheme employers. We're still completing our year end, and I'll come to that in my report. We're going to do a refresh of our data, as I said, in August, and that should show an improvement again, and we'll report that to the regulator when the regulator asks for it, sometime in September, October.
Thank you.
So, sorry, I've just got to find myself again. So, we've talked about conditional data. We're also working on completing our year end and the data extracts for the scheme valuation. As I said, we will then provide an update to the pension regulator sometime in September, October. I'll just go back a minute. So, yeah. So, as I also would like to say, our data quality report is also linked to our data improvement work stream, and we will be bringing a further report of that later in the year. The current membership, just to give you we look at the 3 classes of members, which totals 149,000 members. This has increased this year due to a number of transfers into the pension fund from other LGPS schemes. A number of academy trusts from Leicestershire and Derbyshire have opted to transfer their pension funds into Nottinghamshire, thus bringing together a number of schools into one academy trust. What we've also been doing is working with academy trusts to move them to single employers rather than having a multitude of employers as single schools. So you'll see fluctuations in the numbers of scheme employers within the fund, and these change over time as schools and employers come in and schools and employers go out. This is becoming much more of a trend as academies start to move across other funds and amalgamate. So, as I say, the current number of active employers is 281, which is down from 292, and that, as I say, is due to that fluctuation. I've also included a list of new employers and the type of employer body just for information. I've set out the complaints and employee disputes up to the 31st of March 2022. The most general complaint is around calculation of benefits, ill health retirements, along with a number of complaints around transfer cases. There still continues to be complaints raised relating to one of our AVC providers, the Prudential, although we have seen some improvement from last year. The issue has been raised nationally through the LGPS scheme advisory board, and the monitoring of performance is ongoing. The pension regulator is also aware. The fund continues to receive subject access requests from claims companies seeking information relating to members who have transferred benefits out and subsequently lost their pensions due to possible fraud. Again, this is an issue across the LGPS and is being monitored by the LGA. Requests have reduced over the last number of months, and any claims that are being made, the fund is responding robustly to, if that's English. Yeah. Year-end activities. In terms of our year-end activities, the report shows there has been an increase in the number of accurate returns from employers by the deadline. I can report all returns have now been received, with 99% balanced and loaded into the administration system. The remaining employers have outstanding queries which are with the scheme employers. These, however, need to be completed by next week for the fund to be able to issue benefit statements as per the legislation. Just as a comment on this particular item, we continue to have issues with employers providing data on time. We do work with them. The deadline was set for May for them to provide information, and by last Friday we had one large employer that had failed to provide information. That actually came in on Monday, which we loaded into our admin system, and we've passed back that information, or passed back issues in that data back to the scheme employer for them to complete by the end of this week. What may happen is some of their employees may not receive their benefit statements, which we will possibly need to report to the pension regulator at some point. We're monitoring that situation quite closely, and we have asked that scheme employer to, if there are failures to provide benefit statements, they need to communicate with their scheme members.
May I come in on that one, John?
Yep.
Particularly, thank you. I mean, the key issue here, that if an employer does not produce the information in time and accurately, that
Yep.
creates a lot of extra work. And I just wanted you to update members what we can do as a pension fund
Absolutely.
to pass on those costs, if we can, to those employers, because it's unfair that should an employer performance not be as good as we would expect,
Yes.
then it would be unfair for other scheme employees to share costs that they had nothing to do
Absolutely.
with. So if you just outline that
Absolutely.
quickly.
Under the administration strategy, it allows the pension fund to charge scheme employers who are late providing information. So we monitor that quite closely. We work with them as well, because obviously it's in our best interest to get that information in up to our closing dates. However, with this particular scheme employer, we have I'll call it a fine, but we do actually charge them the cost of the additional work that we undertake. It's fine charging them, but obviously that doesn't give us back the time that we've actually taken to actually do that extra work. So it's a bit of to quote a phrase, it's I suppose a stick to beat them with, but really it doesn't help us at the end of the day because we've taken extra time.
Yeah.
But that's what we can do. We do work with them throughout the year. We have meetings with scheme employers. We run a number of sessions in January, February, so that scheme employers are getting ready for their year end, and that's as much as we can actually do at this point in time. But we do charge them. It's not just this one employer that I've given an example. There are others. Some of the academy trusts are slightly find difficulty in providing data, so we do charge them.
Okay, thank you for that, John. But just a final question on that point.
Yep.
Are you happy that as a fund, we are enabling employers the best we can to do that? So in terms of employer support and compliance, we have been encouraging them to do that.
Absolutely.
And that there is somebody there should they wish to ask for help.
Yes. What we have done this year as well is with the agreement of Pension Committee, you've provided additional resources to us for employer support and compliance. So we are taking that forward to try and offer extra support. The LGA offer support as well by providing training and things of that nature. So there is quite a lot that is done.
I just wanted that to be on the record. Thank you, John.
No. Right, performance data then.
John, sorry, I've got a question from Councillor Waters, if you want to take it now.
Yep. No, I'm
That's fine.
happy to take it now. Sorry,
John,
I've got...
Yeah, I'm just going back to page 7.23. I'm looking at the list of complaints, and I know year after year since 2019-20, complaints have actually been increasing. Really, why is that? But I also note that from 2019-20, there was still 2 complaints outstanding. The following year, 2021, another 2 complaints standing. Then 21-22, there's a 16 complaints still outstanding. I'm just looking at the justified and partially justified. So in 2019-20, about 43% of those cases checked were justified or partially justified. 70% the following year, justified or partially justified. And what's been checked for 21-22, 87% have been justified or partially justified. Can you just give a bit of information behind that? Is there an issue why we're seeing an upsurge in justified complaints? And what's behind the increase of these complaints? And why are some complaints taking 3 years to look into?
Sorry, Councillor. Yes, there has been an increase in complaints, and I think there's a number of issues. From 2020-21, obviously we were going through the pandemic. We had quite a lot of requests for information, recalculations, and transfers. And I think I've mentioned that transfers have been a particular issue. It's just basically the volumes that we've had over the period of time have created a number of complaints, because we haven't been able to respond to individuals' requests for information as quickly as we might have done prior to the pandemic. And that, if you want, that's the general position that we've had. We also, in 2021, lost three members of staff who retired or left, where their experience and knowledge is very difficult to replace, and that created some backlogs. Also, in terms of transfers as well, where we have seen a number of complaints, is that the TPR introduced changes to the transfer regulations, requiring funds to undertake further checks. That has increased the time frame of undertaking transfers, and that has also had an impact. And the other thing that has also been an issue is the increase in requests for pension information and pension valuations of individuals' pension benefits. We've seen an increase in that, and that started from 2018 when there was a change in the regulations, and deferred members were given the option of being able to take their benefits from 55. And through the pandemic, we've seen an increase in those requests, and it has been difficult to keep up with those actual requests. So there's a number of things. Also in there as well, there were a number of complaints relating to AVCs, which I logged, and I've reported previous years where we were getting quite a few complaints about the payment of AVCs through the Prudential. Again, the pension fund has tried to rectify some of those by working with individuals and the Prudential, but that has been a national issue, not just a Nottinghamshire pension fund issue. So there's various issues. In terms of those that are still outstanding, those were the ones that were outstanding in that particular year. Obviously, we've closed them down. Maybe I ought to just look at how I've presented those figures, but they're not outstanding now. It's just that they were outstanding at the time of reporting.
Okay, so that was a vagary of the reporting timing, and I think we've said we'll hear later on about recruitment in the report, and that's part of we as a committee have said we want more resource in to improve performance. I think the other point I'd make about that is there aren't really any benchmarks against this data that we could compare ourselves to other pension funds, but actually, in the terms of the size of the fund, these numbers are still very small.
Yeah.
They're very small numbers. If you look at the numbers of members we have in the fund, they're quite small. But we do certainly want to make sure that those members get the service that they deserve. John, would you like to continue?
So I was just going to come to performance data. So the performance data shows the quarters of the completed processes. This is a new table that I put in because I wanted just to give you an understanding of the number of processes we actually undertake, and this is just against our sit for benchmarking KPI. So the performance data just shows some of the main activities and processes that we undertake. You'll see, if I point out a number of things, deferments, for example, we process something like 4,492 deferments, and against the KPI, we only made 32.6%. The reason for that is we always put deferments at the back of the queue, because paying benefits is one of the highest priorities. So we look at retirement benefits. You can see we're up at 95% because that's our main priority. So the fund's performance really average against our KPIs is around 66.8%. I think it's 66.2% the previous year. This has been impacted, as I've said earlier, by an increase in retirements, transfers and deaths of members. As I've said in my previous statement, transfers were also impacted, again, like I said, by changes in the legislation, which has increased the time taken. We're now having to refer members to refer them back to financial advisors and to MoneyWise in order that they have the right information before they make a decision in relation to the transfer. And again, the fund has put in additional resource to support that, as was reported earlier in the year, and we appointed a new member, I think it was back in November time, to look at that process.
May I just add that for new members, that obviously scamming pension funds, people's financial investments is increasing, and we've been proactive in the work that we've done and the communications that we've done to help people understand their position, and what John's just described of having those financial advisors commit, and in there it's helping people avoid very, very bad happenings in their funds, in their pensions, future pensions. Thank you.
Thank you. Just in terms, I'll refer you just to Table 1, which shows this year that we have seen an increase of 35% in the number of KPIs we've actually processed. This is a new table that I've introduced, just to give you, as I said earlier, a flavour of the number of processes that we're undertaking. Table 2 just gives you a flavour of, this is the total number of processes that have gone through the administration system. It's very difficult to measure everything that we do, but again, if we put that 56,000 is where the pension team has touched a process at some point within the admin system to get an output. So again, it's just a bit of a flavour of what the type of, or the number of processes that we're actually putting through. As I come to the end of my report, there continues to be an increase in requests for deferred benefits. As I've said, again, we see this as people wanting to access their pensions early. And having talked to colleagues across the funds, they have also seen this, and I think it's probably, obviously, a reflection of coming out of COVID and the financial situation as it stands at the moment. Just as in the last part of my report, I've put in just to give you some idea in relation to the death processes. Members will remember that the scheme actuary came and gave a presentation to the committee about valuation and included deaths as part of that presentation. And this chart just gives you an indication of well, the number of deaths, how we followed the pattern in terms of COVID, and we have seen, and I would say this, that we have seen a trend, an increase in deaths in service. We used to average probably 1 a month. At the moment, we've averaged around 6 per month. It just seems a little bit odd. We're not quite sure why, but that's what's happening in the fund at this point in time. So I'll draw that to a close, Chair. Obviously, happy to take questions as well, and if there's any clarification needed.
Thank you very much, John, for that in-depth presentation. I'd just like to ask a question, maybe Sarah would like to come in, about staffing levels and recruitment, just to let members be assured that we are looking at this and we're trying the best we can at the current time. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, sorry.
As contained within the report, there is a table about the establishment within the pension admin office and the numbers of posts that are currently occupied. As John's already reported, that we did, a number of experienced staff left us over the last year. I think it's fair to say there are virtually no ready-made LGPS experienced individuals out there in the market. We've been out to recruit for a number of posts across a number of different grades with little to no success. So we've actually taken a slightly different approach more recently. We felt that the application process was probably a barrier to people applying for some of these posts. And there is now a much more modern way of people applying for jobs through job boards, and actually applicants registering with a job board and then actually having potential opportunities pushed out to them automatically, and actually having quite a cut down initial application process. So we've been out over the last couple of weeks to 2 very specific job boards. Indeed, members of the committee have probably seen that particular job board does advertise quite extensively across a number of media platforms, but also to a pensions-specific job board called Pensions Careers. Interestingly, we have had no applicants come forward from the Pensions Career Job Board, but we have had extensive numbers of people come forward from Indeed, to the extent that we've actually had to pause the advert while we review the applications. And through Indeed, a pushing of that particular of those jobs, actually an applicant then submits a CV rather than going through quite an extensive application process. We've then done a quick recce through that particular CV and then invited those candidates to apply for the post through a cut down application process where we're asking them to fill in just or respond to 3 shortlisting questions. So we've pushed 200 people through to the apply post process, and to date we've had 55 responses, which I think is really quite staggering compared to what we were getting through the more traditional route. What we've also done is we've deployed some online testing out to those people who have submitted an application form. So that had actually gone out at 8:30 this morning. That's a numeracy and a literacy test. It's not an extensive time commitment, but again, it allows us through an online process to measure somebody's numeracy and literacy. Then what we will do is take that score, we will look at the response to the 3 questions and then invite them for interview. We've also circulated that application internally to the BSc, and we've had a number of internal applicants come forward. So I think we are going to have to look at much more modern ways of doing our recruitment. I think we've made a start with that process. John and I have also had discussions about as we bring people in. As I said, it's very difficult to find people who've got LGPS experience. So perhaps we increase the number of people who come in at our entry point where you require no pension experience. We train them, we develop them, then we have a ring-fenced recruitment to promote from within, and we keep topping up at the bottom and then developing our own staff. And certainly if we have a look at the individuals who've more recently been appointed to our grade 4 position, they're all internal candidates who've come in, we've trained them up, we've given the basis, and then we're able to develop them. So John's also been looking at how we do our induction. So members of the committee will attend the fundamentals course through the LGPS. We're looking at how we can have a version of that. It's called the Insight programme. And also we're looking to appoint to, we're calling it a training officer, but I think we're actually going to look to widen the scope of that particular position, because I think it's more about training and development. So we want to build an active apprenticeship programme. We want to engage with the graduates programme. We want to contact the local education establishments and offer them these positions, and actually start to develop pensions as a career going forward, and to give both our existing and new entries professional qualifications, and then really get them so that they develop through a range of posts and activities within our own administration. I think there's other things that we should consider, such as a career grade structure, etc. And certainly John and I have talked about doing a review of the structure and then coming back to committee with some indication of what we think our structure needs to be, so it's fit for purpose going forward into the future and a much more digital environment. Okay.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think very important that we hear that. Just before we go on, Councillor Cubley, you've got a question?
Yeah, it's just on page 9. It talks about offering it to graduates only. Is it just only people with a degree, or is it open to everybody? Because it says a graduate.
No, it's not. Generally, we're trying to. Generally, the majority of our trainees come from a wide variety of backgrounds who just apply, not necessarily graduates. We are looking at going to the universities and colleges to try and encourage people from those backgrounds, but we advertise across all people, and as long as they've got the basic skills in relation to pension, I suppose administration that we require, which is numeracy and literacy, then and we test that, we will take anybody in terms of that. I generally say if they've got that, they can come and train with us, because that's what we want. But we are trying to get obviously a number of people from different backgrounds and different education. That's generally it.
Sarah, have you got to add to that? Did you?
Yes, please. That particular point is reference to the authority's graduate programme. So the County Council has its own graduate programme, and what we want to do is to tap into that programme, because current graduates that are on that programme, they have placements around the organisation, and obviously they come with a wealth of skills and quite an extensive skill set. So that was being able to offer out specific placements more from a project management capability, not necessarily just coming into work in the admin office. So I think there is two aspects to graduates within the pension admin office. Okay.
John, you wanted to add just another point?
Yeah, just to add and give you flavour nationally, the LGA have set up a focus group, which I'm a member of, in relation to training and capacity building across the LGPS nationally. they are looking at various ways of supporting LGPS funds in this very difficult time of recruiting and training, and it is recognised across the LGPS, not just obviously in Nottinghamshire. So, and that's starting to develop again, looking at apprenticeships across the LGPS and things of that nature. Okay.
Councillor Camilleri.
Yeah, I'm quite excited about this actually, because you talked about simplifying the application process, and it's meant an increase in how many people apply for the jobs. This is something that's over the council overall. We're having a real problem recruiting staff. Perhaps we have been a bit complicated when we have the recruitment start. You're asking for too much. You're making it more. You're making it simpler for everybody. Therefore, you get them coming in. I think that we need to look at the processes of this all over the county, all over the county council, how people apply for jobs, because I think people are a little bit frightened of them, and especially in pensions, like it's quite complicated, but it's not once you get in it. And I'd like to thank you for doing that work. It's really, really good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Camilleri. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a general question about the working out of pensions, and something maybe to help out, so to speak, is pensions is an extremely complicated thing to actually work out an actual figure. I understand that and appreciate that. But up in the LGPS, is there not somewhere, somehow, that we can actually go online to say, these are my figures, and these are the permutations on the figures, because there's so many different permutations, and these are what the expected, because you can't be exact, obviously, expected outcomes would be, which would obviously take a lot of time away from having your staff having to do these pension forecasts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, sure.
There's a number of things. There is actually a calculator on the LGPS website. However, as you know, we're developing our own or redeveloping our own website, and we will be looking to add something along those lines onto our new website. What I would say, though, and I would add caution to it, and other funds have found the same, is that you open that up and it's like opening I can't really, a floodgate, absolutely, because you have to be able to understand your salary and your salary calculations to put into your calculations to be able to come out with a correct figure. And that has been found to be a little bit more challenging for people because they think it's just a salary and it doesn't quite come out as
Chris, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, that's really good news on that side. When we get finally to the stage of the individual staff member going on to the NCC pension site to hopefully maybe get an estimate, will the permutations be in place for the individuals when they put their figures in, or will it still be just a generalised figure on the dates, basically?
It'll be a generalised figure because of the complicated nature of the LGPS with its 2008 and up to 2014 and 2014 figures. So it is only generalist. We have to be very careful of that.
We have to be very careful about GMP, McLeod, and all those other things as well, don't we? So, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. And I think, Gordon, Councillor Moore.
Well, Chairman, I've sat here for a few years now and listened to many arguments about which investment companies doing best, how they can improve, where we're going financially. This is an excellent report. Now, this to me shows what's actually going on behind the scenes. All we see here really is the big picture. We argue about what we're going to invest in. Should we invest in this? Should we not? And we can spend hours on it. But what's happening here, 57,000 processes, transactions. All of these, deaths, deferments, retirements, they're always sensitive parts of your life and must take an awful lot of time. So I would like, on behalf, I do represent the district councils, and we've lost 2 very senior officers recently, both in service. I would like to thank the officers, because over the last few years we've had a difficult time, and I think this is an excellent report. They should be congratulated on the professionalism of what goes on behind the scenes that we don't see. So I would like to give them my personal thanks, and thank you for a good job done.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. That's really appreciated by everybody here. We do bring regular reports to the committee, and we get this is an annual report, but you're absolutely sure when we right that when we do have to increase establishment or do other things like the digital transformation that Sarah mentioned in 2 words, but it's a lot more than 2 words, I can assure you. It's really appreciated that you've seen that. Thank you very much for what you've just said. Are there any more? Councillor Turner, sorry, Mike, you missed it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just echoing what Councillor Moore's just said. Thank you for the report, and certainly in the background of some of the challenges that you've got on recruitment, you know, some initiatives that you're taking on board now that are really interesting. But just echoing that, almost 57,000. If we look at the average full-time person works 228 days. That's 250 a day that your team are doing. It's probably 2 dozen that they've completed while we've been sat in this room. You know, it really does put some context to it. So again, thank you ever so much. If I may, just revert back to page 5 of the report where we just talk about the membership statistics again, and I'm not sure if this might be something for Tamsin to comment on at some appropriate point, but we see over the last 5 years the active members who are paying into the scheme is static, yet over that same period we've seen a 21% increase in pensioners and a bow wave behind it of a 35% increase in deferred members. And you know, we've got the same amount going in, but there's more needing to come out, and we just need to be cognizant of that as a committee. Thank you.
Yes, William.
Can I make a very quick comment
sure.
on that, as Tamsin is not here? You're absolutely right. The fund is becoming more cash negative.
Yeah.
The implication on the investment side will be that we'll need to arrange to take more of the investment income out of the investments. And this is not just Nottinghamshire, it's every fund in the country just about.
Yeah.
One of the issues which will come up is that I don't think pooling sub-funds actually have income options. So that's one of the things to consider in the future. But you're absolutely right.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mike. Yes. Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Cubley, Eddie.
Whichever. Just going back to performance data, I know you touched on the deferments, and you did say something about the transfer quotes being so low. Can you just go over that again, please? Because I've missed it. Yeah. What the explanation was.
Which page, Eddie? What page are you on, sorry? Just for other
16.
members? Yeah.
Sorry. Just in terms of, let me just find, the transfer quotes. In relation to those, we see a number of transfers. Generally, most transfers will happen between pension funds, so LGPS pension funds. We then get a number of transfers from or members seeking to transfer out to other types of financial pension provision. And they are quite complicated. Plus also, as I was trying to say, the pension regulator changed the or increased the process in terms of referring members who were transferring out back to get further financial advice before they made the choice. So transfers. So we've not been hitting our KPI to be quite honest in terms of transfers because of the numbers, certainly the increase and the increase in time, plus the fact that we'd lost a number of people who did some of that work. So, you know, we are behind on those. We try and move them as quickly as possible. What tends to happen is people will ask for a transfer value, will provide the information, and it will take them time to come back and make a decision as well, which is all being right, but we tend to get a bit of a backlog, I'm afraid. So I'll put a hand up to that, and we are a bit behind on that.
I know that we have KPIs and you're all supposed to meet them, but I think it's very important that when somebody's considering transferring their pension, that they get the right process. And I think that's part of the understanding of how things have moved and changed on this type of work. So thank you for your question. Are there... John, yes, John.
Just to end on that, and as we said earlier, we have appointed a new person to look at and help those transfers through. That happened in November, December time, and they've been going through some training and things of that nature. And we are training new people up on transfer processes. So it just takes time, I'm afraid.
Thank you, John, for clarifying that. Councillor Camilleri.
Clarification, John. Do you have all the transfer requests you get? Have you got kept records of those that don't take them up? Because I mean, when I was a financial advisor, a long time ago now, I would say, well, why don't you request a evaluation of your government scheme, see what it is? And very often they get the valuation and do nothing with it. Yeah. You get like that.
Yeah, we do. There are a number of companies as well that are going out and are contacting members around transfers. I mean, I personally had a letter in the post asking me whether I was going to transfer my pension out. So there are, and you'll see things in the press as well. And I can look at those figures and bring those figures to you, but every transfer is a sort of an individual case, to say this. There's a company based in Kent that do tend to pick up a lot of members who they contact and look at, talk to them about transfers, and we do see people asking for valuations and then they don't take them up, which is sometimes a good in some respects for the members themselves.
Thank you, John. Nigel, you've got a question.
If I may, because it's around those KPIs, because you make some really good points, John, in terms of the way you've been stretched and stuff like that. It's therefore about the basis of the KPI themselves. And you mentioned on the focus group, and is that what the plan is to try and do in terms of get to a more reasonable and understandable KPI because of the mix that LGPS funds are about?
Thank you.
Yeah, just cover that off. We are in a benchmarking group, and the actual cost per member is from the benchmarking group. I will be bringing some further information on those KPIs because the benchmarking group covers something in the region of about 30 local government pension funds, and we do benchmark ourselves across against those. So there will be some further information on that. However, just to re-emphasise, the Good Governance project across the LGPS has also recommended that pension funds do look at benchmarking, and that's something that I think SAB, the Scheme Advisory Board, were looking at as well, to reinvigorate some benchmarking. So there's quite a bit of work going on around benchmarking at this point in time.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any more indications of comments, question. I think that's been a really, really good report and discussion. So, again, thank you very much, John, Sarah, and your team for the work you do. We did move the recommendation on page 19 of the report, and it also says in it, and processes that will improve the service to members of the fund. So that brings in the transition as well. So it's been moved and seconded. I'd like to ask for those to vote for your vote for, please. Anyone against? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, we now move on to item number 6. Now, it was a bit remiss of me at the start not to invite our guests from LGPS Central, but anyway, we're at the stage now where we're moving on to your item. So I'd like to welcome Joanne and Mike to this morning's meeting. Before I hand over to Mike to move the recommendation, which is on page 21 of the agenda pack.
Yep, and I'd like to second that with
Thank you very much.
reserving my right to speak, please.
Thank you very much, Mike. Okay, so I think I'm handing over to Joanne to start the proceedings. Is that right?
Thank you very much, Councillor Kerry. Thank you, and great to be back here, and great to see everybody again. Before I start, can I just check how long we've got for this? Because as you know very well, we could talk all day about this, but I suspect that's
About
not what you...
20 minutes, something
But
like 20
right, we'll
minutes.
talk fast in that case.
Yeah.
But thank you very much. So what we really want to do today, and if you can move to the next slide, is to really give everybody a bit of an update on where we are right now. It's been a wee while since we've been up here. And in particular to focus on Nottinghamshire pension funds investments within LGPS Central. And to talk, again, just a little bit about where we're going in future, to always have that eye to the longer term, because we are here as your long-term, to be long-term investors on your behalf, to make sure that we can help you pay pensions to your pension scheme members. And again, we're going to touch on staffing and recruitment, which is an issue for all of us. But we thought this might be a really good opportunity, if we can move on to the next slide, please, and then the one after that. A really good opportunity really to just think about why it is that we have pooling, why it is that we're here in front of you today, and why LGPS Central exists. And it would be a good sort of reminder for those of you like Nigel, Councillor Kerry, who've sort of been around pooling for probably longer than any of us would care to admit to or what we want to be reminded of. But also I'm conscious that there are a number of new members here. And for that, I'm going to go back to George Osborne's budget of 2015, when he very proudly stood up at the dispatch box and said he wanted to create a British wealth fund. One of the ways in which he wanted to do that was bringing together the assets that exist within the 89 local authority pension funds in England and Wales. There are different rules that exist for local authority pension funds in Scotland. And his focus then, and we've all been paying attention clearly to what's been going on in politics over the last week or so, and over the previous year, his focus then was really about getting money into infrastructure investment and leveraging LGPS assets, and to really find a way of doing that by leveraging the scale of those assets, because whilst there are 89 local authority pension funds across England and Wales, some of them very big, some of them very small. In London, some of them are barely touching £1 billion. It was really about bringing that together to leverage that scale. But it also reflected concerns at the time about efficiency and the value for money from LGPS Central, LGPS pension funds. Because what was being observed is that some funds of very similar size, very similar scale, very similar sort of formats and liability profiles were much less cost efficient than others. And you know, I was very interested to hear the numbers that you were talking about today. I think when I first heard John speak, I thought he said £40 a member, and I thought that can't possibly be right, because I know that you're a very, very efficient fund. So £14 a member compared to the £21 nationally. But there were concerns about how people were being compared to each other, and also concerns around governance. Now, because it was a view at the time, not my view necessarily, but a view at the time that perhaps governance of some local authority, some LGPS funds were not as efficient and as expert as others. And that really led to this concept of pooling, based around 4 key objectives. So first of all, based around scale, so making sure that the pools, the asset pools that will come together will be at least 25 billion in assets under management. that there be strong governance around decision-making on investment matters, so strong investment governance, reduced costs and excellent value for money, and improved capacity to invest in infrastructure and other sort of private markets asset classes. Because for a lot of funds, they hadn't done that, and that was partly, again, related to their scale, but also the levels of internal expertise available in those complex asset classes. So after many, many iterations, we ended up with the pooling structure that we've got today, and that you can see on the next slide. There we are. So what we've got today is still one LGPS fund for England and Wales, with assets grouped across 8 pooling institutions, some of them constituted as authorised FCA investment managers such as LGPS Central, others have a slightly different structure, across the 89 administering authorities, of which, of course, Nottinghamshire Pension Fund is one. So drilling down into, to sort of zoom in a bit more locally into the next slide, you can see what that looks like for LGPS Central, where we have 8 local authority pension funds within the LGPS Central pool. And I think we're very fortunate to have the funds that we have, all of whom are very committed to the pool, all of whom are committed to working to us. But I think one of the other great benefits we've got is that we've got 8 contiguous funds. And that, I think, is a real geographical strength. And as we think about some of the debates, some of the wider political debates around, you know, and this isn't a party political point, but sort of levelling up on all those sorts of issues, actually having all of those funds together, and actually those funds who had worked together prior to pooling coming together, I think is a real strength for us, because it means that we do have a sort of common interest and a common geographical interest. And you can see we're sort of spread from Cheshire in the west right the way through to Nottinghamshire and Leicestershire in the east, but a big geographical block there. And it's our job to design the funds, our job in the company, LGPS Central, to design the funds, to appoint managers and to have the ongoing oversight of those funds and those management and those investment products. With a big focus, as you've seen, as no doubt we'll discuss, and we discussed with you last time we were here, on responsible investment and engagement, which is integrated into everything that we do. And Mike, I'm sure we'll pick that up in a moment. And it's important to remember, because I think when pooling was first set up, everyone thought, well, everything's moving to the pool. But actually, and you've been talking about this today, you as Nottinghamshire Pension Fund have very, very important responsibilities, not least of which is actually paying the right people to the right amount of money on time, which is, as you were saying, you know, one of the things that kind of gets forgotten when we're talking about all these billions. But actually, if you can't do that, then it sort of doesn't matter what the investment performance is, because that's the thing that members actually see. So again, I think, you know, really comforting to hear the great job that's been going on here. So all the administration, all the issues around actuarial evaluations remain with the individual administering authorities, as does the issue of strategic asset allocation. And again, that's a very important distinction, and one that we might come to touch on. So if this is a sort of genesis of how we came to be where we are, what are our key themes as we stand here today in front of you? And perhaps we can move then to the next slide. The first is around fund performance, because if we can't deliver fund performance, you know, that's, you know, one of the things that we're here to do, to deliver the fund performance in order that you can generate the pensions to pay to your members. And Mike's going to talk in detail about that, but I think, you know, the headline is, you know, against a very, very difficult investment market, and I, you know, with other hats on, see how difficult that is at the moment. I think we're doing well. Recruitment and retention is a very big issue for us, as indeed it is for you, as we've been hearing today. One of our outgoing non-executive directors' sort of statements to us at the very beginning of our existence is that our only asset at LGPS Central is our people. We manage your assets. They're not our assets, they're your assets. But our assets are our people. And at the moment, we're facing particular strains there with annual turnover in staff of just around 30%. And that's a big challenge for us because we've recruited great people, and the challenge for us now is to think about how we can keep people, because it's great to have people coming in, but we can't simply be a training ground for, frankly, city managers with very, very deep pockets. So we really need to think about how we can keep and develop and train our people. So very interested in some of the work that you're doing as well, and it might be helpful for us to think about how we can tap into that and leverage off each other. The next issue is really about business maturity, and you'll hear Mike and I talk a lot about this as we've sort of shifted from a start-up company. We've only been going for sort of 3 or 4 years in anger. Start-up company really into being a business as usual entity. Most of the asset classes have launched. Now, that's not to say, to pick up William's point, that as funds needs change, we will clearly add, in response to partner fund demand, new asset products, new investment products. And we've both noted your point, William, about income generating products. And so we have to be alive to the actuarial valuations and the change in liability profiles that are coming through our partner funds. But our job now really is to focus on process, how we can improve those processes and how we can generate efficiencies to deliver more on cost savings for you. And so as we look forward, you're going to hear the company talk an awful lot more about moving from that startup phase into business as usual, and to really think about the long term. What do we want to look like? What do we want to do? What do we want to be delivering for you as our partner funds over the next 5 to 10 years? And as we think ahead to our 23-24 business plan, and Councillor Kerry, Nigel, Keith and others will be involved in those discussions, that's the sort of thing that you're going to be hearing a lot more from us about, what do we want to be in 4 or 5 years' time. So I'm just going to pick up on the next slide just a couple of key points. There's not time to go through all of these. And the first is the very obvious one, that we're now responsible for just shy of 30 billion of assets under management. And I think that number's probably gone up since we came to see you last, not too long ago. As we look across the pools, the partner funds in our pool as a whole, that's just over 50% of all the assets transitioned into LGPS Central, with more to come over the course, the rest of this year. But we do remain on target to deliver those 250 million of net savings by 2033, 2034, which I think is a meaningful sum across our partner fund colleagues. We've delivered 13 new funds in this financial year, most of those in private markets. And again, all of those are in response to the demands that come from our partner funds. We don't simply sit over in Wolverhampton, where we're headquartered, to think this will be a good thing to launch. It's very much done in partnership with our partner funds. There's no point in us coming up with a brilliant idea if, frankly, no one wants to invest in it. But I think a really big achievement and really significant development since we saw you last is the announcement of our commitments to net zero by 2050. And that's a commitment on all the assets under LGPS Central's stewardship. But we're also thinking as a board and as an organisation how we meet that commitment to net zero as well. And I have to say our move to our new offices is very much helping us in that regard. And we hope to be able to welcome you to our new offices in due course. But I think all of those achievements and all of where we've got to today is really down to the partnership that we've had with each of our partner funds, and Nottinghamshire has certainly been in the vanguard of that, really making sure that we can all move forward together. And so, again, I'd like to place on record our thanks to the great work of colleagues here in Nottinghamshire, to Nigel and Keith and Tamsin, of course you as well, Councillor Kerry, in your role on the Joint Committee and the Shareholders Forum, but also to this committee for all the work that you've done in helping to make us the organisation that we are today. Very quickly before I hand over to Mike, you'll see on the next slide the list of all the fund products that we have, and the red blobs along the side are those that Nottinghamshire are invested in. So I think you're invested in 15. I did a quick count up of the 20 funds listed here. And I'm not going to go through all of them in detail, but I think what it does show is the breadth of funds that we are operating around against. So on public markets, passive funds, which we manage in-house, and active funds as well, private investment, private equity, private debt and infrastructure, with property to come later this year. So a huge breadth of funds that we're involved in on your behalf. So with that, I am going to hand over to Mike, who's going to talk in more detail about some of those points. Sorry.
Thank you, Joanne. I'm conscious of time, Councillor Kerry. So I'll skip through the slides quite quickly, and then we'll be happy to take questions if there are particular focuses or foci for you. I'm also conscious that my investment colleagues came across and spoke in detail about investment performance, so I won't repeat that. If we go on to the next slide, the list there are giving you some more details about your proportion of the various funds that we offer. The one that might stand out at the bottom, 73% of the infrastructure fund, that's been diluted since this report was put together. You put some more money in, but so did West Midlands. So you're now about a third of that fund, not 70, but a really good range. And as Joanne said, we're really appreciative of the support that you as a fund have given us across the funds the investment funds that we've launched. So this number's probably out of date now, but over 800 million of your fund's assets invested with LGPS Central into LGPS Central products as at 31st of March. So thank you for that. Again, if we skip on to the next slide, this was just to highlight the latest and probably the most important fund that we've launched in a long time, the Global Sustainable Equity Active Funds. This is responding to the demands that everybody's making, members, pensions committees, regulators, government, to focus on responsible investment. So Global Sustainable Equity launched with £1 billion of assets from 4 partner funds in 3 sleeves, broad, thematic and targeted, and you are one of those investors, so thank you very much for that. We're not reporting performance of that yet because it's too early, but we will do in future packs. The next slide just summarises the product developments to come, and Joanne's mentioned property. Direct property should be in September, October this year, indirect property a little bit behind that. Targeted return is coming. This is not one that not so particularly interested in at the moment. It's been driven by Leicestershire and Shropshire. Private debt launched, two funds launched at the end of June to increase the breadth of coverage in private markets. So that's what we're doing for the remainder of the year across the board. We're also looking at the global equities. We've been provided with a whole load of data on the Schroders investment that you have, just to look at how it's doing, how it compares, and we've been tasked to provide some options to you about what you might want to consider going forwards. Joanne mentioned levelling up very briefly. I will be equally brief on the next slide. We have been talking internally and talking with the partner funds in Central Pool about how we approach this. Clearly, the changes in government that have come along recently mean that there's still probably more uncertainty now than there was when it was first mentioned, and there was a degree of uncertainty when it was first mentioned as well. But suffice to say that the contiguous region that Joanne illustrated earlier, we believe is a real asset. If we can do levelling up, the region is good. It has a variety of areas, some of which could do with levelling up. So we think there's a real option here, a real good case for levelling up across the region, and with partner fund discussions, a multi-asset type approach could be appropriate to this. And we'll keep working on talking together about what the most appropriate approach might be. The next slide is responsible investment in engagement, which I know this committee, you as a committee, are very focused on. Again, I won't go through all of the bullet points on here, but just to say that there's been significant achievements over the last 6 months. There's a whole list of them there. Joanne mentioned net zero, so we're really committed to that. And all the stuff that needs to be done around the subject to make sure those commitments can be reached. So that was history. The next slide is a quick look into the future. What are the priorities for the next 6 months? Well, you'll see from this that the activity, the levels of activity that have been high recently will continue into the next 6 months. So we will be completing the climate risk monitoring report for yourselves, which covers the entirety of your portfolio. And we've introduced some more carbon metrics into that report. So going with the evolution of the information that you are asking for us and the information that we are able to provide, because the quality of data in this area is a real constraint on us at the moment, and the better data we have, clearly the better reporting we can do. And one of the issues here, procuring an ESG tool and the associated analytics, is a way that when we find the right data providers, we can pull it all together and make sure that you get what you need to see. Then the next page is on voting, and I know you've got a separate paper after us on the agenda about proxy voting, so I won't go through any more of this. And the next item on the agenda includes the LGPS central voting principles, so I think we'll probably be here. So if there are any questions that rise on that item, we can probably pick them up then. But so again, suffice to say that we vote every holding that we're responsible for. It's a very complex area, but it's right and proper that we vote every holding. Next slide is staffing and recruitment. If we go on to the detail, as Joanne said, it is an issue for us as it's an issue for you. We are managing to recruit new people, get good people coming in. There's a list on slide 19 there of the recent recruits. So we're very pleased that 2 new chief officers are coming in September. This has been a 14-month search to get the right people. Both of them were on 3 and 6 months notice, so hence some of the time. But it was a protracted process. We have to find the right people, the right quality to bring them in, so that the right quality of service is delivered to you as clients. And just mindful of your discussion about graduates and graduate entrants, we've got a 3rd graduate cohort being advertised for and selected at the moment. We had 100 plus applicants, around about 70% of those from the local region. We've screened that down to 50 on the first screen and now to 30 for psychometric testing, and hopefully those new people coming in at the bottom will be in place in late September, October time. We do consider alternatives, so an apprenticeship scheme and school leavers. At the moment, we're mindful of the resources that we've got to make sure when people come in, we give them the best possible experience. So we will broaden that as we go along and get more resources in place in general. My last slide to finish off, and apologies to be slightly over 20 minutes. In terms of our focus going forward, the boards with Joanne, who hold me to account for that, and I hold my exec team to account for these priorities, is looking at our funds. So investment performance is our top priority. It's what we were set up to do. It's what you need. So that's our top priority, but doing it responsibly, growing the private markets allocations in response to yours and other partner funds requirements, and achieving cost savings. We've not spoken much about those, but they are going on. They will be delivered behind the scenes. We mentioned staff retention, so our people is a real focus. We need to attract good people and we need to keep them. And our future, again, as Joanne said, really, really important, because one of the things that will help us to keep our people is giving them a roadmap going forward, a vision about what we're going to be, so that they can view us as an attractive place to stay and develop their careers. So we're doing a lot around that and lots of discussions, because it can't just be our vision, it has to be the pool's vision, partner funds, advisors, the board, the company, so that we have a joint vision going forwards. And that's the key. What next? We've gone through the first phase, now we're into thinking about the second phase, and that is really, really important. So with that, I'll stop. Happy, Councillor Carey, to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Joanne and Mike, for that shortened presentation. Understand, I think it's very, very important that the members here meet you, see who you are, and know that if they have any questions, that you're very happy to answer them. And we don't know everything that's going on. Obviously, we have an overview and a strategic point in the running of LGPS Central, but there's a lot more going on behind, as there's a lot more going on behind the fund here. We'll open it up to any questions, comments. Eddie, did you have your hand up?
Right. Going back to the pooling, because you guys understand it's my first time on this committee. Am I right in assuming it's just basically taking a number of different savings accounts, adding them all together to work as one? Or is it something different? Or
So what pooling is about is bringing together the assets of different local authority pension funds. So there are, as I say, there are 89 local authority pension funds or administering authorities for England and Wales around the country. And what the government basically said was, you kind of need to get together and group yourself together so you've got bigger pools of assets. So, you know, and they didn't particularly lay down how that should happen. So you've got some pools who are sort of quite geographically dispersed, some who are not. But it's basically bringing together, you know, the assets that Nottinghamshire have got, together with Leicestershire, together with the other 6 that I put on that map there, and bringing them together under one roof, and that roof is LGPS Central, with the view that responsibility for managing those assets would transfer from your committee, where you would have previously decided which manager to choose. You're still selecting the strategic investment allocation, the strategy, based, as William talked about, on your liability profile. But we're doing either the investment management directly, which we do for those passive funds, for those listed funds, or we're overseeing the governance and the management of the investment managers that we are selecting to manage those funds. So it's sort of bringing all those funds together. So instead of being, you know, the sort of 4 or 6 billion that an individual fund might have, they can group together to make the 28 billion of assets under management that we've got, and then sort of really start to generate some scale and some muscle, so that we're able to get lower fees for the investment products that we're managing and we're overseeing, and that we've got the 70-odd investment experts sitting there in LGPS Central to really make sure that we can give our full-time attention to managing those assets on behalf of our 8 partner funds.
Can I'll just add to that, really? I mean, the key issue was that when we have 6 billion-ish, 6.5 billion funds here, our negotiating power with investment managers isn't as large as it would be if we're a much bigger fund. So you can negotiate lower fees. That creates the cost savings that we all expected as a group, the 250 million. Whatever. So it's critical mass, really, in terms of fund size, and then to get the benefits of that in performance management and cost. Yeah, Eddie, yes.
yeah, is there any protection then in place so that, just say one council or something, if we partnered up with them, and you know some councils are borderline, you know, they're not doing as well. Is there any protection in place that it means that we don't get some of their liabilities if they got into financial difficulties?
So the short answer to that is yes. There's a lot of documentation that sits behind the pool. There's something called the Shareholders Agreement, which sets out how the shareholders, how partner funds as shareholders will work together. There are the Articles of Association that we have, and there's also an inter-authority agreement that was signed back in 2017, which again sets out how partner funds will work together and what might happen if one partner fund suddenly decides that it doesn't want to be in the LGPS Central pool, but it wants to go off. Who knows why it would, but it wants to go off to somewhere else, and making sure that you wouldn't be left on the hook effectively.
Just to clarify, just a little bit of what's the word, parochial answer to that in terms of our fund. So we make strategic investment decisions both in, in what kind of investments we need in terms to get the return we need to pay the future pensions of our members. We then allocate that into different asset classes and spread that risk across different investments. We do that in a number of ways. We used to look after them ourselves, or we go to an investment manager who looks after it for us. What this does, it brings those, LGPS Central in some respects are one of those investment managers for us. So if their performance is not good enough, we can challenge that, and we do. We do challenge that. So we can then choose, well, do we want them as an investment manager or whatever it is. Hopefully, so far, it needs time. Investment performance is not a day-by-day thing, it's over a long period of time. We're in there for investments for over a long period of time. So the other thing is, we also are the shareholders, so we can make decisions about the company and about it operates, all that kind of stuff. So, and it's also about LGPS Central managing their third-party investment managers. So we've got an overview of all that. Your point about, so if we and another and if we put money in a fund that other funds put money into, if that fund underperforms, we all lose from it, but we work together to make sure that doesn't happen. But if a pension fund's individual performance falls because of their asset allocation and their decision on their strategy is wrong, we don't pay for that. We're responsible for where our investments go. We're not responsible for where the funds' monies go. Does that clarify it for you? Okay, Lee, you were next.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's just a quick question. This fund, the LGPS Central Fund, is targeting net zero in 28 years' time for 2050. There are other funds up and down the country who have brought that forward to target in 18 years for 2040. Is there anything LGPS Central could do to proactively bring that target forward for net zero?
Thank you, Councillor Walters. I would say 2050 is a target at the moment. That target will continue to be under review as things develop. We do have a shorter-term target in terms of reducing carbon intensity by 50% by 2030. So there's a near-term consideration. I think part of the issue is 2050 is a long way away. Part of the problem is the data, making sure that we know exactly where we are. That's developing rapidly. So over time, when we get better data, we see what the progress is, then those targets are up for refinement. And my hope would be that the target becomes shorter and definitely not longer. The other issue as a pool is talking with all of the members of the pool, all of the 8 partner funds and ourselves to get a common understanding and a common approach. And hopefully, well, we will definitely keep those dialogues going, and we will be representing and driving in the common interests of all the partner funds in the pool.
I'd like to add to that. You're well aware of the work we've been proactive within some of the investments we've made and our ambitions for carbon neutral. I believe there's a problem in making too much of a commitment too soon, because part of the report says how difficult the metrics are. It's very difficult to actually prove what you're going to do, and if we suddenly say we're going to do this by then, and we don't know how we're going to get there, we don't know what the metrics are, that I think that's almost a form of greenwashing for me. I think we need to continue to look at the data improvement, look at the things, and improve our commitments when we can, but be confident that what we say can actually be achieved. And actually, if you remember the earlier comment about tomorrow, we have a working group come up tomorrow about engagement, which is a significant part of trying to improve that transition. You can contribute towards that then. I look forward to seeing you. Councillor Moore, you were next.
Just a question about LGPS, actually. Obviously, I realise there's 8 there. How many more organisations like you are there in the UK?
Gordon, could you switch your mic on?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
There you go.
So, as I say, there are 8 pools in England and Wales, so we're one of those asset pools. They're all constituted slightly differently. So, you know, and you can see on one of the slides that those pools are. There's a
Page
map.
27 of the report.
Thank you.
Our,
I don't have the report in front of me. It's flicked off my screen. And that shows you where those 8 pools are. That pool organisations are. They're structured slightly differently. But I think one of the important things to note is that, you know, we get together with those pools. So Mike will meet the other chief execs. I'll meet the other chairs of the pooling companies. And that's one way in which we learn from each other, and we can sort of share experiences. And, you know, I suspect, and this may be your next question, you know, in 5 years' time, will there be 8 of them? I suspect. That's the next question. And it's one that we ask ourselves regularly. And I suspect the answer is no, there won't be 8. And so, again, as we look forward, we need to think about, you know, where do we want to be in that, as in terms of, you know, those that are still left standing, because I think we do a very, very good job on behalf of all our partner funds, and I think there are other pools who perhaps benefit from some of that expertise.
If I could just add to that, with a 30% staff turnover, you know, which is really high, I would have thought people would be looking at that, maybe becoming more London-centric, because that's where the people are. I know it's disappointing, but if you can't get them to work wherever you're based, it's not easy, is it, for the future? So it's obviously that there's going to be less of you in 10 years' time.
Oops. I think one of the things I'd just add, if I may, is that, you know, other pools are finding some of the same challenges on recruitment, and, you know, I think one of the benefits that we've got is, you know, we're not paying stratospheric salaries to investment managers, and we should not be paying stratospheric salaries to, you know, the sort of stuff that you see down in the square mile to investment managers. And I think one of the challenges that we've got is, you know, there is no earthly reason why investment management has to be done in the square mile of the City of London or up in Edinburgh. And I think one of the challenges we've got, one of the opportunities we've got, is actually to build a centre of excellence on investment management in this region. And, you know, we were talking about getting grads in. You know, Nottingham University's got a brilliant business school. So one of my questions to Mike is, have we got any grads coming to our graduate programme from Nottingham? You know, I went to the University of Warwick's business school, so that's a reflection on its brilliance, by the way. But, you know, so there's lots that we can do in this region, and I think that's part of the opportunity and the excitement. One of the reasons I signed up, you know, a long time ago to chair this organisation, and not one of the ones in London. So, you know, I think there's a huge opportunity there, and it's for us to really take that and grab it.
And that's part of levelling up also. Exactly. So that, and the other thing is that through COVID, we've all noticed that actually there's a lot more remote working. So it is possible for people at certain levels elsewhere to be able to get to those higher salaries by working part of the time from home. So it is a difficult area, but, you know, obviously you're working on that. Okay. Any other? Councillor Camilleri.
Just for clarification. Really, looking at the central funds investments on here, I did notice that the 2 of the largest funds, we've got very small amounts in them. Obviously, they must be the most popular funds, the LGS Global X Passive Equity Fund, and the one below it. And then we've got one, the infrastructure, where we hold 73% of it. Why would that be there?
That was at the time. It's now, we're about a third now. Another fund has joined that. Okay. Putting the money in.
But why have we got such a small amount?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, that was an investment decision on our part. That's not their decision, that's our decision.
That's our decision.
And I think when these funds we have a good passive manager, and we didn't feel we needed to put money into the central pool, but we did dip a toe in just to kind of keep an eye on what was going on there. Whereas the infrastructure fund, we needed another big manager, and therefore we put a lot into it. But very much a decision at this end, not at that end.
Can Nigel just come in on that, please?
Yeah, you have to remember that on the passive one, we were already in a sort of pool arrangement, and a Shires arrangement, in the knowledge that the pooling was coming along. So that's in theory why that it was a natural that the partners that we've currently got in the pool are the partners, because those are the ones that took advantage of actually going with one large organisation already to give us the benefits. So, and that's driven in terms of the model, in terms of the savings from that. And there's a discussion for us to have with our LGPS Central in terms of where they will transition, I think, in terms of the management. That's where I would like them to be, but some of our other partners have got a different theory about that. So I think, Keith, you want to...
Sorry, Chair. There also was a deliberate decision to invest in a lot of these funds, a small amount, so that we got the experience of working with those funds, and we had the performance information related to them. So I think we're probably invested in more funds than many of the other ones, and that was a deliberate decision. Just dip your toe in the water, find out, working with the people doing those investments and working with those firms, what the performance is like, and then we can make a decision to invest more at a later date. So that was part of the thinking behind it.
Just don't summarise, William.
Yeah, I've got a number of questions which are going to touch on kind of some of the things we've talked about, but I mean, just indulge me, please. First one's a very, very quick one. You talked about £250 million savings. Can you confirm that is an annual savings number, not a cumulative number?
That's cumulative.
Right, so there's actually only over 15 years. You're talking about really, what, I mean, 10, 15 million pounds a year. So for this fund, £2 million a year. Is that correct?
Sorry, William. That's cumulative net savings, so after all the costs of running LGPS Central. And it also is only derived from the funds that have been launched. So you'll see we've launched an awful lot more new funds. The savings that those are going to generate haven't yet been factored into those numbers. There's a very complex cost savings model that is maintained by one of the other partner funds, and that does take an awfully long time to update. So we'd hope that that number would be significantly more than 250, but at the moment we can't put a number around that.
I really think it needs to be, because 250 million is £15 million a year on average. I know it's not that, but that's what it is, which is £2 million per fund. I'm afraid that is nothing in the perspective of this fund. So it needs to be a lot higher than that to make it work.
Can I just, one of the ways it will be a lot higher is if we get more assets to manage. So, you know, it becomes a bit of a virtuous or vicious cycle, whichever way you want to put it. But, you know, that's, to Councillor Kerry's point earlier, you know, we can leverage our scale. And as I said, we've got 50% of the assets come across. That means there's another 50 to come across.
I absolutely agree with that. That's why, you know, as you touched on earlier, there are going to be fewer than 8 pools going forward. You need to be a lot bigger to make this work. Next question then, in which case, is have you thought through about the disruption to clients if you are either forced or choose to take on another pool or assets from another fund? Because we all know that mergers, acquisitions really take a huge amount of disruption. In the private sector, there is an incentive to do that because you have the profit motive. But that's not true here. So what thinking are you doing about future potential kind of, not mergers is the wrong word, but future collaboration in some way with other pools or other funds to avoid disruption to clients?
Well, clearly any step that we were, and again, this goes back to the point I was making about our founding document, so clearly any decision to merge or to work with other partner funds would be one that we would take with our shareholders and our partner funds, because we don't operate in the way that a private sector investment manager might be, which would be to frankly just go out and do it. So that would obviously be something which we would consider with our partner funds. But yes, you know, and we had a board strategy day on Tuesday. It feels like a long time ago, but it was only on Tuesday. And, you know, we're sort of thinking about all of these thoughts and thinking about, you know, what would we do to position ourselves to be one of those remaining funds, and how would we go about, if we were to do that, to think about, you know, what would a coming together look like? Because it isn't, you know, it wouldn't purely be our choice in the company. It would actually be, sorry, I'm pointing towards you, Councillor Kerry, because you are the shareholder representative, but ultimately it would be a shareholder and partner funds decision. And part of the thinking around that would be around potential disruption. But of course, the other 7 pools would have exactly the same considerations.
I wouldn't want to speculate what government regulation or requirements would put in front of us in years to come. However, I would say that as a professional company and as shareholders, we need to understand that the company is putting that kind of information on their risk register and is considering that as a future threat to the business. That's really as far as this goes right now, and as things develop, we're ready for it, whatever comes out of it, William.
No, I think that's right. I mean, it is. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but it is actually quite a risk to the fund in terms of, as a client, not a shareholder. So next quick question is on recruitment. Recruitment, we have touched on this. I'm going to ask a very similar question in a slightly different way. How much do you think the difficulties you are experiencing is A, due to location, B, due to not wanting to pay as much as the city does, or C, other factors?
All of the above, William. It's difficult to put your finger on one thing, but it's all of the above. But I would caution. It's taking us a little bit longer, but we are still managing to find good people. Our key is to keep hold of them afterwards, because part of the issue is we bring in good people. Because we're a small organisation with a whole range of funds, people get great experience quite quickly, and then they become very marketable propositions. So that's our biggest challenge. Yeah, recruitment's a challenge, retention is the bigger challenge, and that comes down to making sure that the location is not a really negative factor. So flexible working we've introduced, and we'll continue to evolve that. The whole cultural development, personal development, career development within Central, we look very much at internal progression of people. And when somebody develops more skills, well, let's apply them. Let's find a more senior, more broader role for people to take on. So internal improvement is a big issue. We have annual debates with shareholders about what the appropriate employment costs are going to be for shareholders and within the company to make that, to make it as little of a disincentive as possible in comparison with what is potentially on offer elsewhere. So we look at that, but we also look at the non-monetary factors. And so, for example, just quickly, 4th of August, the Commonwealth Games cycling time trial starts and ends in Wolverhampton. So we're seeing whether we can just get away that people can come out of the office. We have a little bit of not quite a team outing, but we can do something social around that. And those are the sort of things that we look at in the kind of non-financial mechanisms to make people think, yeah, Central's a pretty good place to be working. I want to stay here. I want to grow my career here. But part of your comment about pools, 8, less than 8, part of outlining the vision about what comes next is going to include that, and that's going to be important because we've got bright people, clever people working in the organisation. They're making the same jumps of logic that you are now and saying, well, is this company still going to be around in 3 or 5 years' time? So I need to hear from my senior management and my board what their views are. So it's a key part of that focused vision going forward that is really key to retention.
And if I can just add.
Okay, I am conscious of time. William, is it a very, very last short one, please?
One question. Just, you've launched, 20 sub-funds of various sorts. How are you kind of reviewing how they're working? And do you have a process for reviewing them?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. They're all reviewed on there's a formal schedule. So all the ACS funds are reviewed every quarter. We report back to partner funds every quarter. And the evolution of funds as the universe moves on is something that we're acutely aware of. We've got formal 3 and 5 year reviews. The first formal 3-year reviews of some of the initial funds are going ahead now, and the recommendations that come out of that will be taken back to pension committees and shareholders.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to thank Joanne, Mike, for coming along. I think that took a little bit longer than we thought, but with some new members, we gave them the opportunity to meet you and question you. I think that's been really, really good. So there was a recommendation at the start of this, which was seconded. Can I ask for your approval, please? All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? An abstention. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you. So are you staying or are you leaving? Or that's entirely up to you. Yes, okay. Oh, right. So yes, of course. But if you want to stay in the meeting, that'd be great. Okay.
It's really helpful for us to hear.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Okay. So moving on to item number 7 on the agenda. It's about proxy voting. It's a regular report. Before I hand over to Kieran to present the report, I'll move the recommendation set out on page 47.
And I'd like to second that, please, Mr. Chairman. Reserve my right.
Thank you, Mike. Kieran.
Thank you, Chair. This is the quarterly update on the proxy voting undertaken on behalf of the fund to the end of March 2022. The report in paragraph 5 says that Hermes EOS, who vote on our behalf, attended 457 meetings, opposing one or more resolutions, 230 of them, and recommend, in paragraph 6 says they recommended voting against or abstaining on 656 resolutions, and a summary of those against and abstentions is provided in the pie chart afterwards. A slightly newer bit of detail in this quarter's report. We can now refer members of the pension fund committee to the stewardship update that LGPS Central provide on how our shares have voted, and we link that now. We link to that now from the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund website, and that's highlighted in paragraph 8. The specific references to engagement with Apple and WH Smith are mentioned in the update to March 22. That's it for the summary, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the summary, Kieran, and we've done that in response to previous comments from the fund, so it's now more easily available, and let's hope that members will be looking at it on a regular basis. So I'll open that up to questions. Any comments, please? I don't see any. Okay. So we need to vote for the recommendation, which is on page 47. All those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions, please? There's one abstention. Thank you. That's carried. Moving on to item number 8, Local Authority Pension Fund Forum Business Meeting. Again, before I hand over to Kieran to present the report, I'll move the recommendation set out on page 50.
I'll second that, please, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mike. Kieran, over to you again.
Thank you again, Chair. This is a report on the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum Business Meeting held on the 13th of April, which I attended via Zoom. As usual, the report mentions a couple of the items that were discussed at the meeting, particularly, as paragraph 4 highlights, the problem of deforestation by industrial livestock companies. And then following on from that, there was a presentation given by the International Union, which is a kind of collection of national unions called UNI Global, and LAPF does intend to do some collaborative work with them in the future. As part of the background to this report, we'll provide a link to the quarterly engagement report that LAPF produced. There's mention made, just to highlight one item in that report, mention made of the positive meeting they had with AstraZeneca and how it had not sought to profit from its production of the COVID vaccine. But the link to that is embedded in the report below. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kim. LAPF do a lot of very, very, very good work, and we recently went to one of the conferences, and it was very hard work. There will be a future report about the conference. What I would ask members to do is carefully look at what is available, what conferences are available in the future year, including LAPF conferences, about responsible investment, about strategic investment, all those kind of things. And I would ask you that it's a good opportunity, really, to get involved in what's going on behind the scenes. And so please take a look at it and talk to Tamsin to see if she can help you to get more involved. Thank you. Any questions or comments, please? I don't see any. Okay, we've moved the recommendation. I'd like to ask if all those in favour, please. Any against? Abstentions? No, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So item number 9, our final substantive item on the agenda, is the work programme. It's set out on page, the recommendation set out on page 54 with the yellow papers behind. I'll move that recommendation.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to second that as well.
Thank you, Mike. Questions or comments, please, from anybody? Keith, do we need to present this work programme in Tamsin's absence? I think it's fairly clear what's in it.
So we've taken the opportunity to put items into the committee dates now, so it's clear as to when items are going to be coming to committee. There's still a couple of items to be placed, depending on some additional work that needs to be undertaken on those.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Keith. Any questions or comments about the work programme? Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Just a silly question. Can we have some dates of the meetings, please?
Joe.
Thank you. I was trying to catch your attention. Just to say the meeting programme has finally been confirmed this week, so hopefully the dates, as in the form of calendar invitations, will be with you incredibly shortly.
And may I ask that when that happens, can you send out to all committee members an update of this report with the dates on?
Yeah,
please?
no problem. And may I also just update on the pensions board, which met a couple of weeks ago. At their next meeting, we've captured that there will be the annual report of the pensions board, but there's also a recommendation that will be coming forward to committee and captured within the governance review about a review of resources for the investment side because of what the board recommended in terms of its review of the risk register.
Yeah. So. And I attended that meeting. I was allowed to speak by the chairman, and we are supportive of what they're asking us to look at. So that will be in the September meeting. If there are no further questions or comments, okay, we've had the recommendation. All those in favour, please. And that's unanimous. Okay. Can I thank you all? That meeting was really good feedback and really good comments by members and officers here. I just want to say one thing, actually, that I don't want to miss it. When we talked about the LGPS Central report, working also behind the Shareholders Forum and the joint meetings, actually we've got the officers who are involved in the Professional Advisors Forum from all of the funds available. They also do a very good amount of work behind the scenes. So Keith, thank you for you and your team, and Nigel for what you're doing there. And I now formally close the meeting. Thank you.